It's Beer O'Clock and this is the Beer O'Clock Show. My name's Mark and joining me, the man with the golden Essex voice, is my beer buddy Steve. Hello Steve.
Hi Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Very good. Also joining us is the godfather of British beer podcasting and a man about Edinburgh, Richard Taylor. Hello Rich.
Good evening. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you mate. Thanks for joining us.
It's okay. I've never been called the godfather of anything before. It's very sinister, but I kind of like it.
Well, we're pleased that you like it. We've got what looks like a very nice Scottish beer tonight. So we have a hoppy blonde from Fyne Ales called... Now, we were debating last week whether this is pronounced Jarl or Jarl.
Okay, which one did you go for?
We didn't know.
Okay.
We sat on the fence. We were waiting for you to tell us, Rich.
I believe it's Jarl.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's because it comes from the Vikings. So if you want to be extra Viking, you can maybe go for Jarl. Right. It depends how loudly you shout it, I suppose.
It's a 3.8% beer, a nice and easy one after what seems like weeks and months of heavy-duty beers. But we'll get to that in just a little while. Steve.
Yes.
What have you been drinking lately, buddy?
Quite a bit this weekend. Found myself in the midst of a mini session at home on Friday evening, and all the beers started blurring into one another after a while. But there were two standouts that I just wanted to mention. One of them was the new collaboration between Adnams and Bode Brown from Brazil, called Curitiba. Which is a pale ale, really enjoyable beer. Lots of dry tropical grapefruit flavors in there, but then with that typically pronounced malty Adnams backbone, just to balance it out. So that's a really decent beer. So keep your eye out for that one. And it's only available, I think, in bottles, in limited quantities. So if you do see one of those, pick one of those up. And the other one that I just want to mention as well is, and I'm a bit late to the party on this one, it's one of those beers that it feels like everyone's been drinking for months, is the Buxton Battle Horse, which was their beer that they brewed to celebrate their 100th brew in their new brewery, a 10.5% black IPA, which was just absolutely stunning. Big hops up front, some pine and toffee in the middle, and then these lovely roasted tropical bitterness at the end of it. So those were my two standouts of the weekend.
Oh, very nice. And how about you, Rich? What have you been drinking lately, mate?
I've been kind of struggling to get some beers down me of late, but one of the most recent beers I had that sticks in the mind is Time Bank's Imperial Cherry. I've been down to Time Bank a couple of times in Newcastle, and they got a great setup there. All their head brewer just left to found his own brewery down the road. But the Imperial Cherry is it's 12% Imperial Stout. It's got lots of cherries in it. They describe it as a velvet-like feel, and it really does. It's like if you could take a handful of glacé cherries and rub it on velvet and then rub it on yourself. It's fantastic. It's slightly sour too, which is quite interesting. So that's definitely one that stuck in the mind recently.
Oh, nice. Anything else that you want to bring up?
I guess, this year it's gone by. I can't believe we're in March already, but the year's gone very quickly. But I do remember I went to a beer dinner at the start of the year, which had wild beers at Spitfire here in Edinburgh, and they did a massive collaboration, as is the new norm. And they combined with the Hanging Bat Brewery and Blackfriars Restaurant and Nangan, which is Tim Anderson's Japanese soul food line. And they all got together and brewed a big beer. It's called Yadokai, and it's a sake-style beer. And I've never had anything like it. I've got to say, it's quite amazing. So again, that was a big one. That was 15 or 16%, I think. It was absolutely huge. But because it was a sake, it was it's fermented with sake yeast, and it was served chilled. Totally flat, brewed to be flat. So it really was just like drinking a sake, and it's one of those beers, I'm sure you've had them yourself, where you think, wow, this really is what beer can do if people just take a little leap of faith and just do something slightly different. I know there were so many people there involved in this collaboration, so maybe it was a too many cooks thing, but they didn't spoil it at all. It was amazing.
And did they serve it in little glasses?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Right.
Little glasses. Yeah. And it was with a pairing dinner. I can't remember what it was paired with now, unfortunately, but it was just just incredible. Yeah, so it's got Yadokai. I think it's still around. Might be able to get some.
Okay. Very interesting. Well, I actually went out and socialised on Friday night for once. Probably the first time this year.
Get you.
I know. Went to the Old Fountain near Old Street in London, which is kind of my work local. And I had a few interesting ones there. The two standouts for me were Highwire NZ from Magic Rock, which I think, Steve, you had earlier in the week, didn't you?
Oh no, it was just the standard one when I was in there. It was just the normal Highwire, yeah.
Oh, I had the fancy one.
Oh, yeah.
And the other one was another Magic Rock beer, which was the Hyperbole, which was smooth as anything. It was gorgeous. Rye beer. I'm not usually a huge fan of rye beers, but that was very, very nice. And yeah, that was my lot. I had some others, but they also had Jarl on tap there, which I decided not to go for because I wanted to pop my Jarl cherry tonight with you chaps.
Oh, have you never had Jarl before?
No, I've never had Jarl before.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well.
Yeah, you're the one.
I'm the one. No surprise to anybody. Steve, do we have any news, mate?
Of course there's news, mate. There's always news.
All right, do you want the pips?
Yeah, give us the pips.
Beep, 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 beep.
Okay, first up, Starbucks is planning to roll out an evening concept, which includes a sale of alcohol to other UK stores after a successful trial at Stansted Airport. The evening programme offers hot and cold meals, including truffle mac and cheese and braised British beef, and premium wines and beers. They're going to be rolling those out to some of their UK stores from around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it'd be interesting to see exactly what beers they're going to be stocking in Starbucks to go along with that, I think. And as to whether or not they're as overpriced as their coffee, frankly. So moving on, to keep a little bit with our Irish theme this season, Jameson's have announced that they are releasing a barrel back, which is a mini glass shaped in the glass of a whiskey barrel, which can be hung on the side of a pint in time for St Patrick's Day. And the idea is that you put a little shot of Jameson's in the whiskey, tiny whiskey glass, and you turn your beer into a Boilermaker, which is a beer with a whiskey chaser. So not all cashing in on the St Paddy's theme there. Sheffield Beer Week has been announced, running from the 16th to the 22nd of March. The week will be showcasing the very best of Sheffield's beer scene, and it takes place the same week as SEBA's conference. And again, Mark once again proves wherever the Beer O'Clock show goes, the trend for beer goes. We, of course, are making our first live tasting appearance in Sheffield the Thursday before Sheffield Beer Week. So we're doing an event that we've called Top Beer at the Hop Hideout. There are still tickets available, so if you're from the Sheffield area, get yourself down to the Hop Hideout and get one of the very few tickets remaining. Shameless plug for our spin-off show, the Beastie O'Clock Wee Beastie thing that we're doing with Harviestoun. First episode of that is out now. Second episode is on its way, but there's also another event been announced where you can go along and you can try some of the Wee Beastie beers. That's going to be at the Elgin in London on Thursday the 19th of March. Tickets are now available via Eventbrite. It's one of these typically long Eventbrite website addresses, so we'll put the link in the show notes for you to go through to. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a news week without some news from our favourite news hounds, Brewdog. So last week they announced the winner of last year's prototype challenge, which is where they released the 4 beers just before Christmas, and the public get to vote on which one's the best. So the one that won was the Vagabond gluten-free Pale Ale, and that will now be added to their headliners range after it trounced the competition in 2014 challenge and didn't at all capitalise on a gap in the market. That's the end of this week's rather tongue-in-cheek news.
Very good. Right, well, before we get on to the main chat with Rich, let's get into this beer, which is, as I said at the top of the show, Jarl from Fyne Ales. Apparently, I'm the only person left in the entire world who hasn't had this beer. It's 3.8% ABV, hoppy, blonde session ale. And the funny thing is, at the old fountain on the big beer board, where obviously they have the beer, the brewery, and what style it is, instead of a style, they just put hoppy with a few exclamation marks after it. So I'm assuming this is going to be hoppy.
Well, it's advertised itself as such, so you would hope it lives up to the to the name. Hoppy Session Ale.
Well, it's lovely and bubbly, that's for sure.
It is, yeah. So it's got a lovely colour. I've got a beautiful head on mine as well. I've once again decanted into a guzzling glass because I do guess that this is going to be another guzzler tonight, having had it before.
That's like a really sweet meringue aroma on it.
Yeah, it's a lovely looking beer. It's really so inviting.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of like vanilla and lemon off that. Very
I'm getting big zesty lemon and lime off of that. And Rich, you've got a couple of bottles there tonight, haven't you? I spied from the Twitter feed.
Well, I didn't know how many you guys crack open at one of these events, so I thought I'd get a couple just in case. But I can always share one with my wife later. But yeah, Jarl, it's one of my favourite beers of all time. In fact, it may be my favourite beer of all time. I was thinking about that in the run-up to this podcast. It's just so accessible. It's just got the fantastic citrus and grassy flavour to it. It's just screams Citra all the way through. One of the time when I was at the brewery doing a guided tour when they had their Fyne Fest beer festival, the head brewer then, Will, just ripped open a bag of Citra hops and said to us all in turn, just stick your head in there and take a sniff. And it just smelled exactly like Jarl. It was just amazing.
Wow. Now, wasn't this one of the first beers in the UK to use the Citra hop as well?
Yes, it was. Yeah, so they brewed this every year for their Fyne Fest beer festival. They brew a special beer, and this was the one they brewed for their 2010 festival. And I first tried it. I didn't go that year, unfortunately. That was the only one I haven't been to, and of course, it was the only festival where it was gloriously sunny, being Argyll. But they actually had it at the Scottish Real Ale Festival in 2010, and that was the first time I tried it. And even then, you just think, wow, beer festivals have their pros and cons in terms of getting the flavours from beer. Sometimes they come well, sometimes they don't do well. But right from the first sip, just thought this is something amazing. And these kind of beers, they've come on since, it's 3.8%. It's a single hop beer. It's got Citra in it. Sorry, Citra has just taken over the market in the kind of 2010 to 2012. Lots and lots of Citra beers appeared. I don't know if they're becoming a bit rarer now because the hops become so just everywhere. But Jarl was definitely one of the first to use Citra, and it does it so well and still does.
Are you getting into yours yet, Steve?
No, I was waiting for Rich to finish that fine introduction to it before we toasted and got on with this, and then I was going to get you to do the first thoughts, because obviously being the only one here that's not had it before. So yeah. Shall we crack into it?
Let's get into it.
Okay. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. There's always a pause when everybody drinks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, I wasn't going to say anything, was I? Mark, over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
No, that's lovely and light, which you would expect with a 3.8%. Oh, and that follow on, the bittering that follows on afterward. It's lovely and sweet and light when you're drinking it. Mm-hmm. Then as it settles, that nice little bite from the hops on the end. And like you say, this is a great example of a Citra beer. We've had a few nice Citra ones on the show before, but this is lovely.
It's just got such a fantastic long grapefruit finish, and that's just the signature of Citra beers. If you haven't had Jarl, you may have had Oakham Citra, which is very similar to this.
Yeah.
And that's no coincidence, because Will Wood was the head brewer at Oakham, and then he moved to Fyne Ales. So he took a lot of the beer styles with him. He's now gone to Lacon's. He's got his own smaller brewery now. He's left Fyne Ales. But Fyne Ales, Jarl, and Oakham Citra, very, very similar.
Yeah, I think this is slightly lighter than.
I think you're right.
beer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's interesting because the term gateway beer is one that seems to be used an awful lot these days. But this is, if you've got sort of lager drinking friends, this would be a perfect introduction into showing them that there's so much more to beer, because it's got a lot of those characteristics that you get from sort of like your mainstream lagers, but then it's just packed full of flavour. And as you say there, Rich, that lasting grapefruit bitterness at the end just goes on and on and on. And it just finishes so dry. And again, it's one of those dry finishes that instantly makes you want to take another gulp of it to kind of refresh the palate. It's such a good beer.
Mm-hmm. And it's all down to the hop. I mean, I think Citra was created by Sierra Nevada, so you can get that feeling because, again, gateway beers. I always talk about Sierra Nevada Pale Ale because that was my gateway.
Yep.
And they're not a million miles away, even though that's probably twice as strong as this. The long grapefruit finish is very, very Californian, and it definitely comes across.
It's interesting you say that because Sierra Nevada is one of those beers. Again, you know, it sticks in our minds because that was probably the first beer that we did on the show that made us realise how good beer was and how good beer can be.
Yep, me too. Exactly the same. Yep.
Yeah, I think that may have been one of the first crafty beers we did on the show, Steve.
I think it was, yeah, back in the early days.
Back in the days.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the label on Jarl, they market it very cleverly in that it says, as you were saying at the top of the show, a hoppy blonde session ale. So I think they are appealing to people who do go for more lagery type beers and think, oh, maybe I'll try this, just to get that gateway effect. And I think it certainly works when people try it. It's definitely got more to it than most lagers, obviously, as you know.
Yeah, if you poured this out, I don't think a lager drinker would be hesitant.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah. I'm having a taste. Sorry, I have to go back.
I am. I just keep diving in. I literally can't put my glass down at the moment because I'm just enjoying that so much. And it, you know, at 3.8%, it is so sessionable as well. You could very, very easily have a good few pints of that and carry on enjoying it, pint after pint as well.
What's the record for the quickest finished beer on the Beer O'Clock show?
Oh God, I think I did. I'm pretty sure I did one in almost one go once.
Oh, really?
Like from the tasting, I think I almost finished one once, but I can't remember which one it was.
Was it? Yeah, that was probably the Unhuman Cannonball the first time it was released, wasn't it? Where you tried to do it in one.
Wasn't quite in one. I think I do have a record for finishing the bottle though. But there has been a few when, especially in the summer, you know, we're tired, we're hot, we come in, drink a beer, and it's down. And it's like, well, the show's done now.
Yeah.
You know, it's only been 5 minutes now. I have to talk about it.
Got to stretch that review out a little bit longer.
I think another good thing about Jarl, where it really stands up, is on the first taste. I know we talked about the long aftertaste and the Californian grapefruitiness you get, but it has one of the best first tastes, I think, of any beer I know, and that's another reason why it's one of my favourites, because it's, as you were saying, it's just a perfect pick-me-up. You know, if you need that kind of Friday afternoon loosener, if you had a long day or whatever, just get one straight out of the fridge, and it's just, the first taste is just amazing.
Yeah, it's so lovely and light, and you got that gorgeous aroma coming, like greeting you as you're about to take your first swallow. And a lovely little package, this beer. I'm impressed.
From beginning to end, yeah. Everything about it is just spot on.
Is it widely available? I mean, obviously, I can get it any dozen places around here, but is it widely available down where you guys are?
I've never seen it before, but then I don't go into bottle shops per se.
It's certainly not supermarket widely available. The ones that we're drinking tonight came from Ales by Mal. That they're a stockist of some of the fine beers. I think they do 2 or 3 from the range. But failing that, you'd have to, you know, I suppose as Mark says, you know, the Old Fountain, places like that, good bars in London are probably going to have this on occasionally when it comes up as being available for them to get. But I doubt it's certainly not anywhere nearly as widely available as it is up there for you, Rich.
Well, Well, I mean, they've just they're expanding quite a lot now. Fyne Ales. They put £2 million investment into their brewery last year. So as they gradually increase production, I'm sure the export markets down to England will pick up. So hopefully you'll be able to find it a bit more readily.
That would be great. I mean, I'd love to be able to go into a lot more bars and see this on tap and be pulled towards this kind of as a starter rather than going for the standard 7.5% double IPA that always drags me towards it.
It'd make a nice like in between beer as well if you're hitting all those heavy stouts or those heavy IPAs and having a lighter, like a little break, a little refreshment beer in between.
Yes, a little refresher, a little refresher in between beers.
Yeah. So, Rich, let's have a little chat about your BeerCast, mate. That was called the BeerCast.
Mm-hmm.
That you stopped a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
but it was around when we started. I'm pretty sure it was still going on because I remember looking you up and reading your blog and listening to a couple of episodes. So I'm sure Steve has a notepad full of questions to ask you. So how did you get a start in doing that? For one thing,
it kind of started almost as soon as I started blogging, really, because I already had a blog when I lived in Australia, and when I came back to the UK, I kind of wanted to carry it on and did, but very quickly ran out of things to talk about because it wasn't as exciting as living in Sydney. But then I decided to try and get into beer because I kind of sensed it was just about to get interesting because I only drank lager from then, and I wanted to find something more interesting. And a friend of mine, Paul, came up with the idea of maybe just doing tasting notes. Just kind of. What we'll get together, try some beers, do a blog post, and then we thought, well, if we're kind of sitting in a room doing these tasting notes, maybe we should record it because it's easier than writing it down. And then we said, well, if we're recording it, why don't we put it out as a podcast? So we did. The first several were awful because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't really know anything about the beers. We didn't know how to do the podcast, but we persevered. And the first one we recorded, I remember we did the whole episode on a glass table. And so when I came to edit it, within about 20 seconds, I realised we just couldn't use it because there was this horrendous crash and scraping sound every time you put your beer down. So we learned the hard way, but we got there and we did 72 in the end over about 6 years. And
wow.
I don't know how many people actually listened to it, but because there were a few podcasts then, beer podcasts, but they were all American ones. They all lasted an hour and a half to 2 hours an episode. So we wanted to make something that was a little bit quicker and easier and just you could listen to when you're on the bus or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. It went up on iTunes and we got some good feedback. And when we stopped in 2013, we didn't get an email saying, why have you stopped? So I think our time had come. But we enjoyed it while we were doing it. Yeah.
So Rich, what was your... were there any main reasons behind you stopping doing it? I mean, I know obviously you do quite a lot of writing now as well. Your blog's well recognised as being one of the best beer blogs in the UK. Was it just that the writing, did you find it more accessible, easier to do, or was it, as you say, did your podcast just come to its natural conclusion?
I think it did, yeah. I think it kind of ran its course. But primarily the reason we stopped was because we actually recorded it in the same room. So we all got everyone together through a one-track microphone. And it just became harder and harder to get everyone together because one of my friends got a job that he had to travel, had a son. And then it just, every so often we thought, right, we'll try and do one this week. And it didn't happen. And it just kind of petered out. So we thought, well, we could try and do it again, but I just thought we'll just pull the plug because we've been doing it for so long and we couldn't get everyone together on a regular basis to keep it going. So that was really why it finished, unfortunately.
I think that's one of the things that's really appealing about it at the same time as well, though, is that you listen to when you guys are talking about the beer, and obviously you can tell you're all in the same room, and it's got a really nice kind of social feel about it, and it's quite literally like sitting down the pub, being on a table next to a group of mates that are chatting about beer and are just having a really good time about it. And that's what really came across about the cast for me, was that it just felt so social and friendly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was kind of what we were getting for. We actually had a wide range of guests on it, friends and people we knew, not famous people or anything, but We actually did start to use Skype when we first started back in 2007. And I remember an episode where we were trying to get Skype to record whilst we were recording our recording. And I ended up sitting with a stereo speaker from a hi-fi, like a walnut paneled stereo speaker on my knee, pointing at the microphone for a whole hour while we keyed in someone's voice from London. But we weren't exactly the best technically minded podcasting crew. But yeah, you're right. That's the reason we started. We started because it was a social thing. We were just kind of sitting around having a beer, and that's really the main. That was the main driving point of the podcast. We would just talk about 4 beers, what they were like, what was going on, and that was it. Yeah. So I'm glad it came across.
And what's it like podcasting again tonight with us? Is it like revisiting an old friend?
You know, it really is. This is really taking me back. It's fantastic. It's I don't know. It's I always enjoy speaking about beers, and it's great to just kind of sit down and have a beer, and you can do both at the same time, and it's fantastic. But yes, it's definitely taken me back doing this, no question.
Making you consider going back to starting again?
Oh, I would love to. We talk about that every 6 months, me and my friends that are here. I think, we haven't done one for 3 years. We should maybe go and do one. And I'm like, well, okay. It never quite comes off. But yes, I would love to do another one, very much so.
I was just going to say, obviously, Rich, it's interesting because you say you haven't done a podcast for 3 years, but yet you still manage to absolutely beast us every week in the iTunes charts, and I just don't. And obviously, the quality of what you were doing was so much higher than what we're putting out here. But who knows? We've got you on the show this week. Maybe that'll boost our ratings a little bit.
I'll see what I can do. For you. The irony is we had no idea at the time. And we still don't what the stats were because we couldn't work it out. It was hard enough for me just to upload it to iTunes, and once I'd done that, I kind of gave up with it. So,
I think it's interesting though because there's probably a small group of podcasters in the UK now that are putting out regular content. And we've obviously tried to reach out for them because the thing in the beer world is all about collaboration, isn't it? And it's about doing stuff with others and chatting to people. And we hear the phrase "beer folk are good folk," which is I stand by that. But it's great to see that actually there are quite a few people embracing it now as a form of media.
Yeah, very much. When we started, the reason why we did podcasting is because it was new and interesting. But now there's so many different ways to get your thoughts across there. Like things like vlogging, that was never an option when I sound like an old man now, but that was never really an option for us. So it was just either full text blogs or you could cobble together something audio. You could put the MP3 on iTunes and that was it. But yeah, there's so many more ways to disseminate what you want to say now. And that gets people talking because everyone has a unique viewpoint, either from what they say or the way they say it. And it's very much a product of its time, I think, the way people choose to put their message out there.
Yeah, and I think it appeals, doesn't it? Because everybody will have their own preference as well as to how they like to consume that information. So I enjoy reading blogs. Podcasts are really easy for me as well because I do quite a bit of commuting. So as you said earlier, if you get a podcast that's a decent commutable length, it's a one journey podcast. I struggle a bit more with the vloggers. I mean, I know there's great content there, but it's I have to be connected to be able to watch this to the internet. And until you can get to a point where, YouTube let you download stuff to watch it offline. But I guess for the consumer, for the beer geek, for people that like to listen to, read, watch about beer, there's so many options now.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing that was good for us is that we actually, because we did it over a number of years, we actually learnt as we went along, not just in terms of the technical thing, but just about the beers, because we knew nothing when we started. We never once claimed to be experts. And I think if you listen to our podcast, you probably understand why. But I mean, have you guys learnt as you've gone along about the kind of beers you like and what you don't like, and it's made you appreciate beer more as you've gone on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me personally, the first episode was probably about the third or fourth real ale, like non-lager I'd ever had. And so if anyone listening from episode 1 to now that's me learning about beer the entire time.
Yeah. But it's great. People appreciate that because they know that, they don't necessarily dial in expecting you to know absolutely everything and the IBUs and everything down to the tiny degree.
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of have something, and if you then kind of appreciate what you're drinking more, and people listen to that, I think that's really, really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, and we have people on who are obviously experts on beer. We've had brewers, we've had people like Andy Parker, who's gone from being a home brewer to a brewer himself, and he knows beer inside out, and other people within the community who have amazing palates, and I'm trying to be like a sponge and soaking all of that up. And Steve has shared his knowledge while we've both been experiencing wider and wider, beers, Italian beers, American beers, whatever, that are coming through. So
I've learned. I think I've learned as well, though, mate. When I came into this, I was, I was drinking beers that you could buy off the supermarket shelf, and that was it. And I learned in a very short space of time that there was this whole sort of almost a dark underworld of beer that existed, where there were these bars and that sold these amazingly ridiculously hopped to 8% beers, and that just I don't know what it was, but I just hooked into that. So it's been a learning curve for me as well. I think to look at this. I mean, if you listen back to some of our early shows, I mean, a lot of what you've been saying there, Rich, really resonates with us. Our early shows are awful. They're absolutely terrible. We often make the joke that the first episode was 25 minutes long, and it was released the week after the Olympics opening ceremony, and we spent 20 minutes talking about that, and about 5 minutes talking about the beer, because we didn't really know what we were doing. But now we try and play around with the format, and as Mark says, we have people on that we know have got as much of an interest in beer as we have. And one of the ideas that we're actually playing around with is doing a series at some point of going back to that first season that we did, and picking out 4 or 5 beers and actually re-reviewing them now, knowing what we know about beer, and seeing how that comes across.
No, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, because your perception will have changed so much since those early days. So you should definitely do that. That's a great idea.
Well, any other thoughts on this very, very, very nice and easy Jarl from Fyne Ales, guys?
It's gone. It's all gone. It's I've enjoyed every sip of that. It's just this refreshing, great big citrusy, dry, moorish, sessionable, hoppy blonde beer from Scotland. Just brilliant stuff.
Yep, same. That's all I can say. It's same. It's just lovely. 3.8%. That's what you want, just to settle in for a night of Jarl. have a Jarl night, and you'll be sorted, I think.
Absolutely. It tastes even better in the sun too. If you get it outside, it's just the perfect summer quencher. It really is.
Oh, I can see that. That is, yeah. I'm going to get a few of those in for the summer, actually, because that they are exactly what you want on a summer's afternoon. Right, Steve, let's move on. Do you have an Instagram of the week, mate? Yes, simple one this week. Only the one really to choose from. Posted early on in the week as well, and a name that hasn't been up for a while, but has been a previous winner, at PlimSean101, for a simply stunning black and white picture of Brew by Numbers 1108 Session IPA, which is up on our Instagram feed, and it's also in the show notes. Make sure to have your own go at the Instagram prize of the week by posting a picture of beer on Instagram with the hashtag Cheers, guys. Very good. Now, Rich, where can people find you online, mate? My website is thebeercast.com, which I do still update every now and again. And you can find me on Twitter at thebeercast. It's my 2 main hangouts. Yeah. Now, on your website, you tend to have a lot of little notes about what's going on around the Scottish scene, right? Yeah. So actually, I do a thing every Sunday about what's going on in Edinburgh specifically, because that's where I live.
But yeah, I do try and focus on what's going on in Scotland because, like everywhere else, it's going crazy at the moment and has been for a few years. So it's just a nice manageable numbers. We're up to, let me get my latest figures of breweries. 96 we're now at Scottish breweries. So that's 86 breweries and 10 people who contract elsewhere. So it's still manageable though, and it's only going to increase.
Yeah, there's so much focus on the London scene sometimes. Obviously, more people talking about the London scene, but head north, and as soon as you hit like Yorkshire and up near Manchester and then Scotland, there's so many amazing breweries doing things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
At times they're dwarfing you've got Brewdog, obviously. He's like this, not even a dwarf. He's like this gargantuan monster staring down the rest of the country. But then you have other people like Harviestoun, who we're having fun with at the moment, and Magic Rock and all these other guys. Just amazing.
Let's not forget, Mark, as well, that we've got obviously the Irish theme this season as well. And there's 70 odd breweries in Ireland now that are now producing amazing beer. I mean, I think all over, not just the UK, but in Ireland as well, there are some amazing beers being produced in this little corner of the world right now.
Yep. Cool. Okay. I think that's about it. Steve, what have we got coming up next week, mate?
Next week is what's becoming a regular feature every season now, and always a lot of fun to administer and record. It's the homebrew special next week. We have got beers from, and these are just their Twitter ats for now, and until they come on next week. So we've got at Broadford Brewer, at Learn to Brew UK, and at Russ Boutique. And respectively, we've got an India Brown Ale, a IPA with various grasses, and what possibly looks like a golden ale as well on next week's show. It wasn't that descriptive on the label.
And at the end of the show, after the tinkly music, we have an interview with our old buddy Fergus from Adnams that Steve did a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Fergus is talking about, again, just staying with the theme that we've got this season. Fergus obviously started off originally from Ireland, started brewing in Ireland, so he shares his thoughts on what's going on with the Irish beer scene right now.
Cool. The Beer O'Clock Show is proud to be supported by Ales by Mail, your premier destination for bottled real ales delivered directly to your door. Visit alesbymail.co.uk and use the code BOCS10 for a 10% discount. You can find Richard Taylor at the BeerCast on Twitter and thebeercast.com. You can find us online at beeroclockshow.co.uk, on Twitter at beeroclockshow, on Instagram at beeroclockshow, on Untapped at beeroclockshow. Steve, I'm on Untapped at Roku, and I'm on Twitter at Roku Beer. Richard, thank you very much for joining us this week, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, I loved it. I just want to say thank you for getting me back into Jarl, because I've not had it for a long time, and that's criminal. And B, thank you for getting me back into podcasting. It's been brilliant. I've loved it.
Great.
Cheers, Rich. It's been great having you on. It really has. And let's extend an invitation now. Will you come back again in the future?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank
Excellent. You. Steve, thanks as always, mate.
It's been the highlight of my week.
And until next week, bye-bye.
So we're continuing the theme around the Irish brewing scene at the moment, and I'm here with Fergus Fitzgerald, who's Adnams head brewer. Fergus, welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
Fergus, you started your brewing career with a brief stint in Ireland about 20 years ago.
Sort of 20 years ago, yeah.
20 years ago.
Sort of that.
Brewing with Murphy's.
Yeah, a very short stint brewing actually working in the lab at Murphy's. I'd actually started my career at Fuller's for sort of 6-month period in their lab, and then went back to Ireland, and then sort of got a sort of very similar position in Murphy's lab as a sort of temporary cover for some of their guys going off doing brewing exams and things like that.
And what was the brewing scene like back in Ireland then?
I don't think you can really call it a scene, really.
Yeah.
I think you had the major brewers, like sort of Murphy's, although they're sort of Heineken Ireland now, but Murphy's when I was there. You had Guinness, and that wasn't really much else about. And certainly where I had no concept that there was anything other than those two when I was growing up. That was it as far as I was concerned. So it's a completely different sort of landscape now.
So the choice for the consumer was fairly limited then. It was stout or stout.
You would
basically.
pale lager or you would stout.
Yeah.
And you had Smithwick's, which was awful at the time. I think it's improved slightly since then, but yeah, that was it really. That was your big choice of beer styles.
So jumping forward to now, we're now in a position in Ireland where we're looking at around 75 breweries. I think there are now. What are your thoughts on how the scene there has now expanded in that time?
I think it's amazing, and in some ways I'm quite jealous really that I'm not there when it's happening, but I think it's amazing, and I think it brings beer to life in Ireland in a way that hasn't been sort of for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing.
And have you had the opportunity to try any of the stuff that's coming out of Ireland?
A few. I try and get back to Ireland a couple times a year, but I hadn't last year. I just didn't manage to get back, so I'm going back in April. But I have tried some beers from Metal Man. I've tried some stuff from 8 Degrees, and all really good. I think to say that the Metal Man Pale Ale that I had was excellent. I have to say that's really, really good beer. And the 8 Degrees is not that far from where I live back home, which is sort of in the middle of nowhere. But so I was quite surprised to come across it in a sort of local store when I was back 2 years ago. So it was a really, really sort of eye-opening sort of thing to see it in a very rural store, sort of not really sort of focused on beer in any way at all. But there was this sort of beer from 8 Degrees. So that was quite a nice thing to see.
And here at Adnams, you've recently just launched a stout to go in as part of your core range.
Yes,
I believe it is the Black Shore Stout. And in the blurb on your website, you talked about where some of the inspiration for that came from, or where you're pitching that in the market.
I think Guinness for me has always been an iconic beer, and I think it has moved away a little bit from what I remember it. Now, whether that's my sort of looking back romantically at the sort of past and how I remember Guinness to be, but I don't think necessarily it is how it was, how it is now as I remember it. So I think it's lost a bit of profile, lost a bit of flavour. So that's the inspiration behind the sort of stout we've done, is sort of how I remember Guinness to be, not necessarily how it is now. So it's got a bit more flavour, a bit more sort of fruity characteristics to it. But I think it's still in the sort of ballpark of what people might consider to be a sort of dry Irish stout.
And it's nitroed as well, so
so the dispense is the same as you'd expect from a sort of a keg stout with sort of nitro on it. Because I think that's, as much as anything, I think for the sort of normal stout drinker, that sort of is the thing they first look at, is what it looks like, and that decides whether they're going to go and buy one, I think. So we tried to make it look same sort of presentation. The head will never be, I think, as clean as the Guinness makes it, because not sort of how we make it. It's never going to be quite the same, but it has a very similar appearance, I think.
Okay, so just going back to the Irish scene at the moment, it might be quite difficult to ask you this from afar, but what do you think the future holds for the scene out there? Because I went out there recently. I said that I think it's probably about 2 years behind where we are in the UK at the moment. What would you hope to see coming out of Ireland in the next year, 18 months?
Well, I think it's probably, I would say it's probably a couple of years behind that again, but I think basically because there isn't that middle ground. I think in the UK you've had big brewers, medium brewers, and small brewers. I think in Ireland you've got the big brewers. There hasn't been any medium ground at all, and it's all the sort of small guys that are starting up now. So I think it will take a bit more time to get to the sort of level we've sort of seen in the UK. But what I hope to see is more beer in more Irish pubs, and not just the sort of towns. It's quite easy to get into those sort of beer-led, style-conscious bars. That's what they're trying to game for. But I think that the ideal is that you're going to, when I drive home to Kilmallock, which is in the middle of nowhere in Limerick, that I'll go to a pub and actually there'll be something there that actually I wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. there will be a beer from 8 Degrees or Metal Man or someone like that, or Galway Bay, something in there that actually I wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. And I think that's the point where you think actually it's worked. I think if it's only going into the sort of big cities, then actually it's a very niche market still. So hopefully in the next couple of years we'll see it get into those rural pubs, which is difficult because there are sort of barriers to trade in sort of how you get in there, and certainly the big brewers aren't going to just stand back and let that happen. It's in their interest to try and stop that as much as possible. So I think that will be a quite testing ground for the next few years.
And when you go back to Ireland, do you have a go-to beer that you like to search out?
Honestly, no. I think the last time I went back, it was back for a friend's stag weekend, and I think Galway Bay. Was it Galway Bay? Yeah, I think it was Galway. Might have been a couple of. No, that wasn't Galway Bay. It was Galway Hooker, and that was sort of the go-to beer at the time. That was only because we were up that way. If I was back home, it just wouldn't have been around. It would have been the Heinekens and the Guinness, and that basically was the choice. Certainly where I sort of grew up. So what I'm hoping is when I go back in April, is that there will be a bit more choice out there. And
is there a brewery that you'd look to maybe want to do something with in Ireland?
I like what Galway Bay do. I like what Metal Man have done, and I do like the stuff the 8 Degrees have done as well. I think they're probably, for me, sort of up the sort of level of it. We've done some things with the Dungarvan Brewing Company as well for Wetherspoons, and so Cormac's been over twice, I think. And we've done a couple of beers, and that was quite a nice thing to sort of do that sort of collaboration with a brewer from Ireland, which again I think when I was in Ireland, I probably would never have imagined that would have happened. So that was quite a nice thing. But I think those sort of brewers I think would be nice things to sort of do something with, and hopefully I think 8 Degrees, their brewery is probably only about an hour's drive from where I live back home. So when I get home in April, hopefully I'll have a little visit out and go and see them.
Okay, so watch this space then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going out to see them out of my own interest rather than anything else. But yeah, it'd be quite nice.
And do you enjoy doing that in your downtime? Just going around and having a look at other breweries.
Disappointingly, yes. I do the Busman's holiday.
Yeah,
I do. And I think that most people that I know who are sort of really interested in beer generally do actually like doing that in their own time. If they're in a part of the world where there's a brewer they haven't been to see before, and it's quite interesting. Yeah, I do quite like going around. So when I've been on holiday in Cornwall, I've gone to see Roger at St Austell just because I quite like going and seeing him and seeing what he's up to. So yeah.
Well, look, cheers, Fergus, for sharing your views on the current Irish beer scene and for giving us some time this afternoon. Don't forget, those of you that are following Season 6 of the Beer O'Clock Show, you can order your exclusive Irish craft beer box from the drink store by clicking on the Season 6 beer list tab on the website.